Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff.
Hey everybody, welcome to Armchair Rocket Science. This is a coverage of the Falcon 9 Block 5 OneWeb launch. OneWeb is a group that is, I got my volume too loud, sorry about that. Uh, they have done, they are doing internet, satellite internet like Starlink. And our guest here is Kiri. Hey, Kiri, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
Okay. And SpaceX is live now, so we're going to go ahead and throw over to them real quick.
My name is Yomei Zhou, and I'm a propulsion engineer here at SpaceX, and I'm joining you today from SpaceX headquarters here in Hawthorne, California. Our customer today, OneWeb, is a connectivity wholesaler in pursuit of bridging the digital divide around the world. Today's mission will mark OneWeb's 15th overall launch and will bring their LEO constellation to 80% completion with just over 500 satellites in space. On board the second stage today, we have 40 total satellites that will be deploying in 3 separate deployments, concluding around the T+1 hour and 30-minute mark. Here at T-11 minutes and 43 seconds, the range, weather, and vehicle are all green for an on-time liftoff of OneWeb 1. With that, let's learn a little bit more about our customer and today's mission.
And I've got to mute because of the copyrights. So while this is playing, let me go ahead and pull up the info on today's launch.
Okay.
This is OneWeb 15. It's launched by SpaceX. It's launching from Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. It's flying a polar low Earth orbit. And they're going to bring the first stage back to landing zone 1, which means it won't be landing on a ship. It'll be landing back here on solid ground, just a few miles from their facility to turn it around. They're going to be returning the fairings, so that's good. They've turned this rocket around in just a few less than 2 months.
Okay.
I think 58 days is what they said. So, any questions that maybe I could answer for you, Kiri, or?
I don't have any questions at the moment.
Oh, okay. Here's some of the stats on the rocket. This is the 188th Falcon 9 launch, 124th flight with a flight proven booster, means it's second. More than one flight, 128th reflight, 49th reflight of a booster in 2022. This will be the 154th booster landing. And right now they're at a record of 79 consecutive landings. This is SpaceX's 55th launch this year. The 58th launch from LC-39A, and the 169th orbital launch this year.
Interesting.
Go ahead and bring that down because, that's sort of bring this up. Kiri, you're new to the rocket armchair rocket science team.
Mm-hmm.
We're right actually right now we're killing time because they're not covering launch. They're playing copyrighted music.
Yeah, you don't want to rebroadcast that kind of music. It'll probably put us in YouTube jail.
And what's real crazy about this launch is you've heard people talk about the SpaceX Starlink satellites.
The Starlink satellites, I believe so.
Yeah. OneWeb is a direct competitor to Starlink.
Hmm.
SpaceX is launching their competitor's rocket. Does that say anything?
That's interesting. It sounds like we're going to
Now,
be.
originally, this is supposed to fly on a Russian Soyuz rocket, but due to the occurrences over there, Russia says we're not going to launch their satellites because they're going to be used against us. All right, they're back.
Falcon 9 is our two-stage rocket and stands at
You can't hear that,
250
right?
feet or 70 meters tall, roughly the height of a 20-story building. When it's fully fueled, it'll hold just over 1 million pounds of propellant that the vehicle will mostly burn through in less than 3 minutes after liftoff. And we began loading these propellants on both stages of the vehicle at T-minus 35 minutes. The bottom two-thirds of the vehicle is the first stage. At the very bottom of the first stage are 9 Merlin engines that will get the Falcon 9 off the ground and up to the thinner parts of the Earth's atmosphere. The two stages will then separate from one another, with the second stage continuing onto orbit while the first stage makes its way back down to Earth for its landing attempt back on land at Landing Zone 1 in Cape Canaveral, which is not too far from where it will take off. Now, if successful, this will be the 4th launch and landing for the booster on today's mission, and it will also mark the 145th successful recovery of a Falcon 9 first stage. As for the second stage, it will ignite its single Merlin vacuum
Stage
or
1, RP1 load complete.
MVAC engine about 2.5 minutes into flight.
Okay,
Just heard the call out that the first stage RP1 load is complete and we're still loading liquid oxygen. But the MVAC engine on the second stage is what will take OneWeb 1 payload to low Earth orbit. Now, right now, that payload fairing is what you see on your screen, and that's where the 40 OneWeb satellites are safely enclosed. The fairing protects the payloads from aerodynamic heating, loads, and contamination during ascent. And once we reach the vacuum of space, we will jettison the fairing halves while second stage continues to orbit. Now, for today's launch, we will have 3 separate payload deployments from the second stage. The first will deploy 14 satellites, and then the second and third will each deploy 13 satellites after that. Now, we will only have live views of the first payload deployment, as we won't have ground station coverage for the final 2 deployments. But for these, we will come back once we regain ground station coverage to confirm successful separation. Now, lastly, that truss structure you see right alongside the rocket there is the transporter erector, or TE. We use it to roll the rocket out to the pad and raise it to its vertical launch position. The TE also routes the vehicle's
for strong battery track.
fluids, power, and telemetry umbilicals from the ground systems to the rocket and satellites until Falcon 9 goes on internal power and clears the pad. Now, at liftoff, the TE will retract in order to clear the way for F9's ascent. So before the TE retracts, we will see the clamp arms will begin to open around the second stage, and then the TE
Starting strong back retract.
will pull away from the rocket slightly. You heard that call out. The strong back retraction has just begun. Finally, at T0, the ground hydraulic systems will pull the TE even further away from the Falcon 9 as it lifts off. You should be able to see right there on the bottom of the screen below the fairing, the clamp arms are beginning to open in preparation for the retraction of that strong back on the right-hand side of the rocket. Now the first stage is connected to a launch mount at the base of the TE, but the structure is hinged and it will retract away from the vehicle in preparation for launch. You may hear this transporter erector referred to as the strong back by the launch teams. You can see that slow tilt of that strong back on the right-hand side of the fairing as it begins to recline in preparation for launch. Now at this point in the countdown, both the first and second stages are nearly fully loaded with 1 million pounds of kerosene fuel and liquid oxygen. Just had that call out that the first stage has finished up its liquid oxygen loading. The second stage should wrap up in about a minute at T-minus 2 minutes. You might be able to see those white clouds gathering around the vehicle. And that is chilled gas from just above the LOX tank liquid surface that we vent overboard to maintain the pressures that we want in the LOX tank. And when that gas comes into contact with the humid Florida air, you can see it condensing into those clouds coming from the booster. At T-minus 60 seconds, Falcon 9 will be in startup. This means that the rocket's autonomous internal flight computers will have taken over the countdown. And just inside of T-minus 2 seconds, we light the Merlin 1D engines for liftoff. Should be wrapping up second stage liquid oxygen loading here very shortly. The OneWeb 1 payload continues to be healthy, and the Falcon 9 team is tracking no issues on the rocket.
Stage 2, LOX load complete.
There's that call out for second stage LOX loading complete. Weather is still looking good and the range is go for launch. With that, we are proceeding into the last few minutes of the terminal countdown. You can see that white cloud coming from the TE LOX line. This is normal and expected. In just about 30 seconds.
Launch gas closeouts.
In just under 30 seconds here, Falcon 9 will be in startup. This is when the first and second stages will begin pressurizing for launch. Shortly after that, we will wait for that final launch director go prior to liftoff.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Falcon 9 is in startup. Falcon flight computers have taken over the countdown.
LD, go for launch.
Our launch director has given that final go for launch. All systems are go for Falcon 9 and the OneWeb 1 payload for launch.
T-minus 30 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds and counting.
All right, we'll go to full screen.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Liftoff.
Pitching downrange.
M1D chamber pressure is nominal.
Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Pad 39A at Kennedy Space Center, carrying our OneWeb 1 payload. Now during ascent, we will tilt the engines, technically called gimbaling, and that'll turn the rocket horizontally slightly in what we call a gravity turn.
Nominal power and telemetry.
So we're still going up, but we're also going horizontally away from the launch pad. You can see a beautiful sunset view of that ascent of Falcon 9.
Vehicle supersonic.
Now in just a couple minutes, we will be throttling the engines down in preparation for max Q, or the maximum aerodynamic pressure.
Max Q.
We just passed through that moment. Now, the first stage or any rocket typically needs about to go about 17,500 miles per hour horizontally in order to avoid being pulled back down to Earth and actually make it into orbit. So you can keep an eye on that stage 1 telemetry on that bottom left-hand side of your screen. Looks like we're going about 2,500 miles per hour right now and increasing rapidly. In a little under a minute here, we will have 5 events coming up in quick succession. So it'll start with main engine cutoff of the first stage, followed by stage separation, a stage 1 flip as it prepares to do the boost back burn, second engine startup 1, where the second stage MVAC engine will ignite, and then the start of that first stage boost back burn. Beautiful views from that camera tracking the Falcon 9. Now we're coming up for main engine cutoff in just a few seconds. And watch out for those 5 events.
Eco. Stage separation confirmed. And back ignition. Boost back startup.
Wow, what an incredible
That
view.
view is from the ground, from a camera on the ground.
Interesting.
There you heard and you see in these incredible views from Falcon 9 first and second stages, that main engine cutoff, stage separation, the first stage flip, second engine startup, and that boost back burn where the plumes from that first and second stage were creating that beautiful light show in the sky. Now that first stage boost back burn is in progress, but it'll end here in just under 10 seconds.
Yeah, basically that rocket turned around and is headed back to where it came from. From
Stage 1
running,
boost back shutdown.
about 5,000 miles an hour.
That was the end of the stage 1 boost back burn. And here coming up shortly, we should have fairing deployment from our second stage.
Fairing separation confirmed.
There's fairing separation. You can see those that attitude
Both
control
vehicles are following
system.
nominal trajectories.
The attitude control system on that first stage, creating those beautiful plumes in the sky on those views from your left.
And from
Now,
way
we
off
did
in
have
the
a
distance,
confirmation of a good fairing
That's
separation for
looking
both
like
of
a
our
big
fairing
jellyfish.
halves. And
Yeah.
this is the 5th and 6th flight of those fairing halves today. And we will be attempting to retrieve them once more when they fall back down to Earth using our recovery ship, Doug. Now here at T plus 4 minutes and 20 seconds into today's mission, we are in the first of 2 planned MVAC burns ahead of satellite deployment. At T plus 6 minutes and 4 seconds, you should see the first stage's entry burn. And we're currently watching some beautiful light show performances from the first stage as it is making its way back down to Earth with those plumes coming from our attitude control system, which is nitrogen cold gas thrusters near the top of the first stage. Now for the entry burn coming up in about a minute, we will relight 3 of our 9 M1D engines. So it'll start with the center engine, followed shortly by the E1 and E5 engines. First stage really putting on a beautiful, incredible show there. Now we do that entry burn of the first stage to slow the vehicle down and help reduce re-entry forces to help us recover and reuse that first stage. First stage and second stage continue to look healthy. We are about 30 seconds away from the start of our entry burn on the first stage. And this will be about a 20-second burn of 3 of our M1D engines to slow that
Stage 2 following nominal trajectory.
to slow that first stage down as it re-enters the thicker parts of the Earth's atmosphere. Hopefully we'll get some really beautiful views from the first stage there on the left.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
There is the start of our first stage entry burn, as you can see.
which is just amazing.
And you can see that first stage flying through that entry burn plume, which deposits that soot on the first stage.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
Did to get that call out for a good entry
Stage 1
burn.
FTS is saved.
Stage 2 continues to be on a nominal trajectory. We are getting some spotty camera connectivity, but everything is looking good from Stage 2 telemetry. You can see the first stage is coming down back towards landing zone 1, and we will start our landing burn of that first stage in just about 10 seconds here. You can see the Cape Canaveral coast on your screen
Stage
on the
2
right.
FTS is saved.
Transonic.
There is that start of our first stage landing burn.
Stage 1 landing burn.
This is the most amazing thing right here.
Really incredible views from the first stage.
That was the sonic booms of it slowing below the speed sound.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy.
Drop the bullseye.
Stage 1 landing approach.
As you can see from that beautiful video from
Stage 2 is a thermal guidance.
from the first stage, we did have a successful landing of the first stage booster back on landing zone 1, and this landing marks the 145th recovery of a Falcon 9 first stage. Now, in just a few seconds here, we will have second engine cut off one of the second stage. We are getting a little bit of some spotty video connections, but you did see the second stage briefly there in the midst of that first burn. We should have SECO 1 here shortly.
MVAC shutdown.
There is that second engine cutoff, or MVAC shutdown 1. And we are just waiting for confirmation of a good orbital insertion from the second stage.
If you look, they're almost to the Panama Canal in 9 minutes from the east coast of Florida.
Interesting.
Expected loss of signal. Cape.
You heard the call out. We are in a period of loss of signal from the Cape, but hopefully we will regain connectivity here shortly.
Nominal orbit insertion.
We did just get that confirmation of a nominal orbital insertion, but the mission isn't over yet. The second stage is now embarking on its first coast phase. So after the coast phase, we will relight that MVAC engine for a second time around the T plus 55 minute mark. So we'll see you back here in about 45 minutes. But in the meantime, enjoy the space tunes, and we'll see you again soon.
All right, that was pretty much the launch and landing of a Falcon 9 booster. We, again, it's like 50, she said it was, probably 40 minutes before the next thing. So we're pretty much going to wrap it up here. If you would, follow SpaceX on Twitter for updates of the launch, satellite deploy, and all that. It'd be at SpaceX on Twitter. With that, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks, everybody. Be sure to start looking for us on the 11th, which is Sunday, around about noon Sunday, for the return of the Artemis 1 launch capsule for splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. We will see y'all then. Goodbye.
Good night.